Wait, let me double check I'm
Okay.
actually recording. Yes. Okay. That would
Okay.
be unfortunate. Okay.
We never make mistakes.
Never.
Welcome to this episode of the Think Like a Producer podcast. This is one of 5 of our starter series that we wanted to launch the show with to really get to the top most frequently asked questions, the top 5. It was a bit of a decision to narrow it down, but we got there. So today's episode is all about our backstories, so you know who we are, why we have experience, why we think it's worth listening to us, and we just want to give you kind of the quicker version. You'll hear many more stories about our backgrounds as producers throughout the seasons of this show. But to start, I get to reveal a not so secret story. So, my name's Christine Baird, and many years ago in 2014, I was working a stereotypical insurance salesperson job in a cubicle in Dallas, Texas. I mean, this is the most classic millennial tale you've probably ever heard. I had been out of college for several years, just doing the normal thing, corporate job, 401k, just totally normal. But if you recall, if you've been into podcasting for a long time, 2013, 2014, these early years, some of these awesome self development, entrepreneurship, lifestyle shows started to appear on the scene, and I happened to be turned on to them early. I'm talking 2013. Somebody told me, hey, you've got to check out these podcasts. So, one of the very first shows I'd ever listened to way back then was called The School of Greatness, hosted by someone named Lewis Howes. And back then, yeah, it was an up and coming show, but it was nothing like what it is today. I had found it. I'd been devouring it. I mean, I tell you, I had an IV in both arms. I couldn't stop listening. It was blowing my mind. Someone who had just had such a traditional educational background, work background. It never occurred to me that people live differently, work differently. This idea of entrepreneurship and lifestyle design. I was just blown away. And I was listening to multiple podcasts, the Rich Roll podcast, still to this day, my all time favorite. And I just drank the Kool-Aid. So, months and months and months have passed. The fateful day happens. I'm about 4 months, maybe only 3 months away from graduating with a second degree. I thought, I'm not really loving insurance sales. Maybe I'll be an interior designer. So I'd gone back to school. I was about to finish this design degree. And I just woke up one day in February of 2014, and I had this moment. I was like, not doing it. Not doing it. No more cubicles. No more corporate life. It doesn't matter what. I'm somehow going to take the leap. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was like, life coach, whatever, that was the thing. So what I did do was I cold emailed the host of this show I'd been listening to, Lewis Howes. And by my total surprise, he replied. And one thing led to another, and I actually weaseled my way in and convinced him to hire me as a graphic designer of sorts. Mind you, I had very rudimentary graphic design skills, but somehow I convinced him I had what it took. So I started working at essentially like an intern level in my late 20s. After 6 years in a successful sales career, I just was like, we're starting over, we're taking the leap. And that was what the very first entry point for me. I was making slide decks for an online course he was creating. Well, one thing led to another. We worked well together. And a few months later, at the end of the summer, I'd graduated, gone to therapy, decided I was changing my life. And he offered me the option to actually edit the audio of his podcast. I was elated. I had no idea how to do it. Didn't matter. I was going to figure it out. So essentially, over the next few months, I taught myself audio editing, started becoming the editor of this show. And then a few months later, my lease was up. I moved to Los Angeles, which is where he was based. And 4 years later, had the wildest ride of my life, quite a baptism by fire, learning everything about podcasting, social media, influencer branding, book launches, big events, masterminds. I mean, you name it, I was somehow involved in it. So it was definitely a learn on the job kind of experience. It was so incredible. I mean, some of the most amazing opportunities in my life. Became the producer of the show that had inspired me to change my life. Tiff came on within a couple years. We got in deep into video. I learned all about video from her. Ended up managing this team of videographers and editors. And I mean, it was quite the experience. So as you can imagine, about 4 years later, I was a little burnt out, and I was ready to sort of recalibrate, reprioritize after that incredible experience. So, said goodbye to producing School of Greatness, moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, just kind of came to the mountains to kind of slow down my pace of life. And over the last 2 years, I've ended up starting my own boutique media agency, had the blessing of awesome referrals with a bunch of different influencers in wellness and business. And so now I get to produce multiple shows. I do a lot of consulting, helping influencers, strategize and launch their shows and then grow them. I get to speak on stage and host workshops, and it's incredible. So that's the story. I am skimming over a lot of the details. There's a little bit more in-depth version of this story over on the audio podcast if you want to check it out. It's episode 1, but that's the story. I'm sticking to it. Tiff, tell us how you got started in production.
I know we're doing the brief version, but still, I admire your persistence and how you went after something that just you didn't know what was going to happen, but you took your shot. And I just your PDF, you pitching to him, you ending up like actually working for your hero. I just hope everyone paid attention. And yes, there's more of a breakdown in the audio version, but just the encouragement and inspiring. This is probably like the 10th, 12th time I've heard this story, and I still get goosebumps every time you talk about it. For
It's so
me,
kind. Thank you.
for me, I graduated. I went to school for video production, film and multimedia. I have my bachelor's degree. Graduated in 2013. Moved to Los Angeles in 2014. Worked for the WNBA in 2015, and had the opportunity to apply for this job closer to the end of 2015, early 2016. So I was working for the WNBA, a dream come true that I had because I played basketball in high school, and I was waiting to renew my contract with them. They were still kind of, they're pretty much what I would say equivalent to another small business, right? They had a lot of kind of like T's to cross and I's to dot. And so while I was kind of in the middle of that, I'm still going to networking events. I'm still working, I don't think I've ever had one project that I've ever worked on just solely, except for the School of Greatness. So, um, I was just everywhere. And a woman I had met at a free event, Yolanda Enoch, who I will always give flowers to, she met me. We talked for a good amount of time at this event. And a month later, she emailed me saying that Lewis Howes had posted that he was looking for a videographer. And she thought of me and thought that it would be something cool for me to apply to. And I didn't know who he was. I was not a fan. My story is so opposite from Christine. I was just in LA bouncing around trying to find something cool to do. And when she sent me that opportunity, she also told me about a person she was a fan of, Ramit Sethi. And I have his book and a couple of his books that he's put out and everything about money, but I Will Teach You to Be Rich, that author. And she said, it'd be great if you sent him something else besides your resume, maybe something that is close to what he might be looking for as far as vlogging and different things. And so I kind of did some research on him, saw that he had a YouTube channel with a few interviews up from his podcast, but he didn't have everything recorded. I noticed that at the end of every video, he asks people, what's your definition of greatness? So I did a mashup. I took him asking that question, everyone who he had on at that point, like Tim Ferriss, Casey Neistat, think he had an interview with Gary Vee at that point too. I'm not really sure, but I just grabbed everything that I could and put it together in like a less than 2-minute video to send over to him with my resume. Send the email. I don't really think about it that much. I mean, it was exciting. I, spent 5 hours for free just making the video, but I just kind of sent it and kind of kept going. After 24 hours, I didn't hear anything, but I saw that he posted the video on his Facebook account and it got 30,000 views, which at that time, because he wasn't doing video and he didn't have the following that he has now, that was really successful. And so he hit me back up and said that he would like for me to come in to do an interview, which we did. He asked me a lot of interesting questions, but I do remember towards the end of the interview, he had asked me why I thought I was the only woman who applied and why there aren't more women behind the camera. And I just remember answering that question of just for basically 2 reasons. That one, I think that, the whole thing is that we're behind the camera. So the representation of the women in media who are actually producers and who are making content, we just don't see each other that much. And I think maybe in the last 4 to 5 years, that's been changing a lot, which has been really cool. But even growing up, I had so many more male filmmaker role models than women. Just I didn't understand. I didn't see the faces of the people who were creating these projects. And then I also told him I think there's a difference between a woman behind the camera and a guy behind the camera, especially if there's a male creator. I think women, in my experience, we are a little bit more vulnerable and we allow more things in our space. And I think a guy can almost show a different side of himself when there's a woman behind the camera. And so those two answers, I think, stood out to him. He also was writing The Mask and Masculinity at that time. So he was thinking about male vulnerability. And I didn't know that, but I think it just worked out as far as where my mindset was and what he was doing for his brand. I come in again. I film Jason Silva and Esther Perel as my first interviews just to test to see what I can do. And I will point this out because I say this on the audio. Those two videos are very magenta. And if you're a video production person, I didn't know how to color correct at the time. So I was figuring it out. I also didn't know how to edit multicam 3 camera setups. It took me 13 hours to edit those interviews and, something I can do in way less than half the time now. And so it was a big learning process for me just to come in and to do that. But I was good enough for him to see the growth and that I could do these things for him. And I think maybe Christine, you can relate to this too. I think what I love about Lewis and all the people that we've been able to meet being on that team, I think he can see potential in people more than the skill set that they have right now. I think he's such a good reader of like they have a growth mindset and they want to learn, and that he hires based on personality more than skill set. Like that's my experience of working with him. And like I said, all the people that we've had the opportunity to be around, I think everyone has learned on the job and we've all grown in different ways. But I will say that experience was great. And it was a little over 4 years, closer to 5, just shy of 5 years. Like Christine mentioned, she was the podcast producer when she left. I took over as the podcast producer. And it was a great experience for 18 months, but it was a lot. I don't know how you did it for, for so long. 18 months of being the podcast producer was a lot and enough for me to, learn what I needed to learn and then decide that it was time for me to move on and figure out where else I can serve in this world. We both, Christina and myself combined, have hit millions of lives, millions of homes, everything that we've produced. And that's sort of like where I'm so grateful having worked in the School of Greatness, because we had that distribution of the good things that we were making. Millions of people had the chance to consume and learn and grow almost in the same way that we did. So I think we both left our mark, and I'm so excited for where the company is going and what Lewis and the rest of the team Greatness is creating. And I kind of said, I don't think you ever leave Team Greatness. I think we are always down to support and help in any way that we can. So it's kind of weird because I feel like we're still Team Greatness. We're just doing it in a different way, on a different level, in our own kind of style. So now that I've kind of, it's been a little while. It's been like a month for me at the time of recording this, but I'm realizing that the value that I'm providing for entrepreneurs and personal brands and small businesses and large businesses, now that I've kind of had a couple more conversations, I'm providing a lot of clarity in the how-to piece of it. And so I'm really excited about this podcast because I'm noticing, and Christine is noticing too, when we get these calls from clients and everything, there's these little puzzle pieces that are missing from their launch, or like what they want to do or how they want to market and what they want to create, that because they've never seen it before, we come in and we kind of help like show them the big picture of what it looks like, what strategy looks like. And so for myself as a producer, that's what brings me the most joy, to hear someone's story and to work with someone that really wants to change the world with their story. And I come in and I provide clarity and marketing strategy for how we can get that story out, whichever platform they choose, and actually hold them a little bit accountable to actually getting it done. Because I think another reason behind this podcast, and I'll let Christine talk about it too, but once you get the clarity, the actual launching and starting and getting it going is really tough. And if you haven't done it before, we understand that struggle of this being the very first new thing for you. And so that's why we're here. That's why this podcast is here, to not only provide the information and the clarity and the education, but to also help you not feel so alone in the fact that you are trying to launch this idea and this story by yourself or maybe with a small team. This podcast to me is it's like my heart just kind of out there for everyone, because I really believe that if we share our stories more and we talk more about what we've gone through, we can support more and more people, and we can connect as a humanity, we can connect as a human race just a little bit more than we normally do when we see how we relate to each other. But Christine, I could talk about this forever. So I just wanted to make sure that I gave my backstory, where I am now, the clarity and the purpose behind what I'm doing now. And, the reason why I think this podcast is going to be so powerful for anyone listening moving forward.
Mm, thank you for that amazing story, Tiff. I love your story just as much as you love mine. And truly, what everything you said is exactly what our intention is for this show. So, we're here to serve. Honestly, this show was born out of the idea that we get the same questions all the time from people coming into this space, this idea of podcasting and YouTubing and creating great social media content, audio, video, the technical stuff, the strategy stuff. And we were like, there's no reason we can't give more people this information if we just make it available. So, of course, if you're one of those people, if this is something that you're currently working on, whether it's your team or you yourself, if you're the host of a show, this is for you. And so, of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Absolutely. We'll have new videos every Thursday and some bonuses here and there. Make sure to check out the audio version. I am a huge fan of audio podcasts. So we're on all the major podcast platforms: Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen. Subscribe to the show. Of course, let us know your questions. We want to answer the questions you have. So hit us up. We're at Think Like a Producer on Instagram. Leave a comment in this video. Let us know your top questions, what you want us to cover, and we will be delighted to answer your questions.
Please be sure to subscribe to our channel. New episodes come out every Thursday, and sometimes there might be some extra bonus episodes for you. Hit the notifications bell to be the first one to know when the episodes drop.